The word happiness to me has always felt like a goal, something that I would someday, somehow in the future reach. Like, right now I'm not happy, but as soon as I get a new car, as soon as I have a fulfilling career, and when I do experience happiness, which, let me tell you, is a rarity matched only by a total solar eclipse, I feel like happiness should feel more happy. Honestly, with the state of the world, it's easy to see why happiness is a virtue we struggle with. In America alone, this past year there has been a global pandemic, a civil rights movement, a terrorist attack on our capital. People suffer from the wage gap, a disappearing middle class, the climate change crisis. But also, there are people that have seemingly everything, and they still can't find happiness. The countless celebrities that died by suicide or overdose or mental illness. Off the top of my head, I can name Marilyn Monroe, Robin Williams, and Mac Miller. Just 3 out of many. So, why is happiness so hard? What is causing our current day long-term unhappiness crisis? Hello, Internet. My name is Ephie, and this is The Human Condition. My friend Katie, who, by the way, I'm starting a new podcast with called According to Philosophy, so stay tuned for that, just took a college course on happiness, so I figured I'd ask her. My question was simple. What is the definition of happiness?
So if you were to open up your computer right now and you were to type into Google, what is the definition of happiness? You get a really bland and vague answer of the state of being happy and a bunch of synonyms like contentment, pleasure, satisfaction, or cheerfulness. Now, of course, I wasn't happy with that answer. And so I Googled what is the definition of happy. And to my surprise, happy is also defined as just feeling or showing those same synonyms. So I went down this whole rabbit hole of Googling synonyms for happy, and they were all just kind of pointing the finger at each other, and it didn't really get any answers. Contentment is defined as peaceful or happy. Pleasure is defined as happy or satisfaction. And it really wasn't until I got down to satisfied where I got a little bit of an answer. Satisfied is defined as pleasure, but the pleasure that is derived from fulfillment of wishes and expectations and needs. Now, obviously I wasn't quite satisfied with that answer either. I mean, is my entire existence based off of the things I want? And hearing happiness described in that way almost makes me feel entitled or spoiled, and that's not what happiness is to me. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, and it really wasn't until I went to metaphysics school that I got a good answer that made me feel good. And that definition is a positive enduring state that consists of positive feelings and includes peace of mind and active pleasures or joy. Now that means, of course, peace of mind, which we'll get to later, but also some of those things that you want. Now, of course, that looks different on pretty much everyone. I mean, nobody has the same idea of what their life is going to look like as another person. And we honestly can't even really say if happy feels the same for every person. But what we can say is that it's a whole lot more than just what makes us feel good. I mean, Aristotle defined happiness as the meaning and the purpose in life, the whole aim and the end of human existence. It is what we strive to achieve. It is the ultimate human goal.
For many, myself included, happiness has been the ultimate goal. However, if you would ask me what that meant, what that looked like, I would say it would look like a successful career, good friends, a happy relationship, maybe owning property one day. Even though that one's a stretch, I am Gen Z, property ownership is like a pipe dream. But for some reason, happiness isn't on that list. I doubt if you'd ask anyone what their goals for the future are, they'd say a consistent feeling of positive emotions or peace of mind. They'd say fame, wealth, family, career. And I think that might be part of our problem. See, I think the mass pursuit of happiness is a new development, which is why we don't understand it very well. And that has to do with something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Or Laszlo's hierarchy of needs if you're L. Thanks, L. Love you. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically a pyramid of human motivation. Our first motivations will always have to do with our basic needs. So water, food, shelter, sleep, safety. If our basic needs aren't being met, it's kind of hard to be motivated about higher needs, like, say, creativity. And I think the way that we understand these needs is sometimes skewed. Let's say a person is living paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet, barely making rent, having little to no income for savings or recreational fun. Lacking financial safety is lacking safety, because loss of finances can lead to eviction, starvation, loss of transportation. I've always thought of safety as primal, thinking of shelter as a stick and stone hut. And maybe that's just me, but I never ever would have thought that being stressed out about money means that I'm not having a need of mine met. Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a whole is also important to understand society's relationship with achieving happiness. I'm no expert, but I would say that for most of humanity's life, we haven't been focused on happiness. We've been focused on survival because for thousands and thousands of years, surviving as a human was hard. Only after survival became normal and human lives settled do I think that things like happiness became a focus. Because in our industrialized society with running water and comfy beds and cars, we don't need to constantly worry about scavenging for food or finding shelter. Thoughts like that for most people don't occupy their time. So what do we ponder? We ponder self, others, our lives, our purpose. It's also important to remember that now most of the common public is educated or has educational opportunities, meaning that we better understand things than we did 1,000 years ago, just generally. All of these things together means that today you'll find more people wondering what happiness is and how to achieve it. As with many things we don't understand, we guess and we hope. And we hope that having more things or achieving more things or succeeding more will be the key to our happiness, whatever that is. Because I think most of us, if you asked us what happiness meant, wouldn't have an answer. The problem is there are ways to be happier. There is a scientific formula for this stuff.
So, human beings have this unique and crazy ability to create alternate universes inside of their minds with only their thoughts at their disposal. They compare these realities with their own past experience in order to plan for their future or for the best outcome. And it works. And we know it works because we're all still here. This ability is awesome and cool and useful, but there's a catch. And that catch is that we have almost no control over it the majority of the time. It introduces things into our lives like desire and greed and pride and even happiness. Now, because we know this mechanism works so well, we know it's achievable, happiness. And the answer to your question lies in the very mechanism that creates the idea of happiness for each individual. Your thoughts. Positive thoughts create a positive mind, and a positive mind makes positive feelings. I know, life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and I'm gonna be honest with you. This isn't easy. It's hard work, a lot of hard work, and discipline. It's so easy to think of all of the reasons that you can't be happy. And I'm going to tell you, you're half right, because we have no control over the things that happen to us. But you're also half wrong, because you absolutely do have 100% control over the way that you react to the things that happen to you. And to truly recognize that, we really have to force ourselves to delay our reactions, stop and identify your feelings, and truly make sure that they are your own, especially when we fall on hard days. Sometimes Unhappiness is caused by circumstances outside of our control, such as when we lose a loved one, or when we're in a troubled relationship, or even when we're on our own. All of these hardships can greatly affect the psyche. These circumstances will actually be some of the hardest tribulations we face on the road to happiness. And it's learning to find the joys of being alive in the hard times that build your strength and the endurance of your happiness. When you lose a loved one, there are literally a billion things that happen all at once. And there's, of course, the grief. But in a lot of cases, there's also the debt and the funeral home taking advantage of you. And not to mention the major adjustments to the structure of your daily life. But what is important is that we recognize when these feelings start to take over. It's important to remind ourselves that time truly does heal all wounds. It may not be on your desired timeline, but it will happen when you're ready. The pain will subside. We also have to express our grief. By bottling up your trauma, you only give it permission to continue to hide inside of you and manifest negative feelings into your mind. That clouds that picture of happiness. We must also remember the inevitability of death, from which no living body is ever exempt. And with that, we have to accept that life goes on after loss. Grieving is absolutely essential to recovering from loss, but we can't live in that. Life goes on around us, and if we don't move on with our life, our lives will move on without us. Accept that there is nothing you could have done to change the outcome, and find gratitude in the finiteness of your loved one's suffering. And if you're still struggling, please never, ever be afraid to seek the help of a medical professional. Just as life and suffering are finite, hardships are infinite. We must remember that there is opportunity in every hardship, including the ones that we face in our relationships. We can improve our relationships and overcome these hardships by talking them out rationally and, again, delaying our reactions. Find a quiet, safe space where you and your partner can talk about your stressors without distractions, and agree to keep a tone of civility during your conversations. It's really important to establish ground rules and boundaries. Some important ones that I use when working out my differences with my partner are: we don't yell at each other, we don't call names, and we don't use personal attacks, we don't interrupt each other. It's important to discuss issues rationally and focus on one problem at a time. It's important to highlight what you can do to rebuild your relationship in light of the things that are hurting your relationship. It's also important to voice your expectations clearly. Consider all solutions before deciding on a solution, and quitting isn't a solution. You need to be able to give and receive support. And finally, you need to be able to forgive. Now, that last one can be a little tricky because forgiveness is hard. And it also takes time. That's why it's so important to set these boundaries in relationships. If those lines are respected, there is no problem that you and your partner cannot solve through good communication. And in the cases where lines are crossed and boundaries are not respected, we need to look inward and learn to love being alone more than we love a toxic relationship. Take a solo painting class. Go on a road trip by yourself, or several. Honestly, if you can afford to travel, there's no reason for you to stay still for so long. Start investing in yourself. Feed your sense of adventure. Try new things. Put thought into making your own life interesting and exciting enough for you. And most importantly, invest in your non-romantic relationships. Surround yourself with people who truly care for you. That will help you see how you deserve to be nurtured and loved. Now, a lot of this is a lot easier said than done, and it might feel like wishful thinking or a fairy tale, and attempting to look on the bright side may even feel like lying in the beginning. but it comes so much more naturally with the more time that you focus on maintaining that positive headspace. Your attitude is the biggest obstacle in your happiness, but training your brain to hold that higher level of mindset is the ultimate key to achieving happiness.
So, there we have it. Just think happy thoughts and have nothing in life go wrong, ever. Easy, right? Of course not. From what I can gather, happiness is twofold. It consists of a positive external and internal environment. Externally, we must be safe, have our basic needs met, and not be swayed by toxic people or relationships. Second, we need a positive mindset, gratitude, optimism, mental wellness. Maintaining either can be difficult. It isn't always easy removing ourselves from toxic relationships, especially when it pertains to money. Partners and parents can be the most difficult to get away from, especially if financial independence isn't something that you have yet. We can suffer from toxic environments like workplaces or school that we can't get away from. We can live in a place that's tied to trauma, or is racist, or isn't a safe area. All of these things are hard to overcome. Like, most people can't just move on a whim. Moving is expensive, time-consuming. While our physical, external situation we can't always control, we can, however, control our mindset. See, this is where I think we as humans face the most difficulty. I know personally, I've always thought of happiness as a destination, something that would come with everything else that I want in life, but I think that isn't necessarily true. Most of us live our whole lives trying to complete our pyramid of needs and motivations, and we think that will make us happy. But I think I'm realizing now that happiness is something you achieve. It's something you work for, something you work on, and not just something that you wake up and find. And I think a lot of times people really don't want to work on happiness, because I can tell you, I've been happy without absolutely any work before. And sometimes it has been because of external factors, a trip to see my friends, a loving moment with my partner. But that sense of happiness has been fleeting, taken away by those anxieties of the future or thoughts of the past. And I think most people are okay with mundanity, with flashes of happiness in between. But I would hate to think that is the pinnacle of human existence. Survival, with a touch of pleasure in there here and there. Our minds are capable of more than we give them credit for. I get it though. The thought of writing gratitude journals or just thinking positive thoughts annoys me. It feels cheesy, and I am a cynic. If you don't feel like that will work, or if you don't feel drawn to either of those methods, it probably won't work for you. But I think that there are so many creative and personal ways to make yourself think in a more cyclical, positive way, like countering every negative thought with 2 positive ones, or saying the opposite of whatever negative thing you're feeling, or removing self-deprecating jokes from your usual conversation. The problem is, our minds are more powerful than we think. It's said that 80% of our brain function is unconscious, meaning that our conscious thoughts are a small portion of what the synapses firing in our brain is going to. For me, that is a scary thought, because my brain thinks a lot, all the time. And 80% of that being involuntary, not only things like breathing, reflexes, my use of the English language, but things like mood, biases, self-perception, and my perception of the world. Consciously creating neural pathways, consciously changing our stream of thought, consciously countering negative emotions is hard. Let me take a moment to tell you that I have complained and cursed trying to record this episode at least for 10 minutes. And I'm recording an episode on happiness. I am telling you that it is hard. Controlling your thoughts, rerouting your subconscious, almost feels impossible. But thoughts are not reality, and I think that's something most of us need a reminder on. We can feel and think a certain way about things, and still remind ourselves that just because we think something doesn't make it true. Like Katie said, we can make an infinite amount of future worlds in our heads, but that doesn't mean that those worlds are real. We can feel like we aren't worthy of love, but that doesn't make it true. We can tell ourselves the sky is purple, but that doesn't mean that the sky is purple. Our thoughts are not a reflection of reality, but rather our perception of reality. Therefore, it makes sense that we can take negative thoughts and turn them into positive thoughts, because what matters is our perception of the world, not the world's actuality. So what? We have a happiness formula, we understand our limited perception, but we're still unhappy. We're worried about tax season, we're stressed about midterms, we're still sad about a breakup. And maybe we're not unhappy per se, but it's not like we're happy either. What now? I think that often we ruin our own happiness. We burden ourselves with thoughts of the past, or strung out on worries about the future. We're so focused on our daily lives, the mundanity of routine, that we forget that living and survival are two different things. We compare ourselves to our friends, to what they've achieved and the significant relationships they have, and think that our lives aren't good enough, that we aren't good enough. We train our brains to think about everything except what we should be thinking about to retrain our brain to happiness. And even when we are successful, loved, with the financial freedom and time to self-indulge and discover our creativity, we still want for more. And I don't think total contentment for the present is a good thing either, because without any motivation to move forward, we won't. But it's a balancing act that we have to consciously be aware of. We have to both be aware and grateful for what we do have, purposefully being mindful of our present, and also planning for a better future. As well as yearning for the future, there is also the problem of being stuck in the past. I hate to break it to you, but trauma processing is necessary for happiness. Grieving is necessary for happiness. Continuous work on your mental well-being is an essential part of being happy. We can't ever change the past, and we won't ever be able to heal the scars where people hurt us or the bad decisions we've made to hurt ourselves, but we can create scars. We can close the open wounds in our minds, and we can move on.
We as humans get so caught up in our own lives that we forget to stop and experience living. We get burned out and we stop finding fulfillment in our day-to-day lives. We subject ourselves to this idea that we need to adhere to other people's standards of us. We get caught up in living our lives for other people instead of for ourselves. And when we pour all of our attention into pleasing others, our minds sort of start to introduce this fear of rejection and failure. And when we manifest those fears, it can tend to stop us from even trying to reach our goals. We should examine our goals and be sure that they're not only realistic and achievable, but most importantly, meaningful to us. Because goals that are meaningful to us are going to be the goals that bring us the most sustainable and enduring form of happiness. Now, another issue that people find blocking their path to happiness is the destructive criticisms that we are all subjected to every day, and even the ones that we subject others to. Destructive acts do not equal positive results, and if we're not getting positive results, it's a useless practice anyway. Exercise patience and tolerance of behaviors that you dislike or that you don't understand, and find gratitude in your differences. Our lives would be so bland if we all were the same and had the same personality. Love those differences. Nurture them. We're all made out of the same energy, and it's a shame that we can at times be so quick to violate them. Receiving destructive criticism is really, really hard to overcome, because your natural reaction is to be upset and hurt. And that's even okay, but we have to remember that we can't live in that place. If you can, tune out this destructive energy until you learn to overcome it, like the rest of your obstacles. In a lot of ways, people are their own biggest obstacles in achieving their own happiness. Our beautifully intelligent minds can manifest fear and anxiety over trivial things like societal expectations. They become afraid that striving for the future they deserve isn't hip with the in crowd. That fear of not being accepted drives them away from even trying to be happy. Conformity is just so constraining that people don't have the space to do what they could to make them happy.
This is a lot, I know. This is not the answer to happiness that we want to hear. It would be so much easier if we could just fit the pieces of our lives together in a cohesive way. A nice work-life balance here, a sprinkle of creativity here, a heaping teaspoon of fulfilling platonic relationships. But if happy was that easy, we wouldn't have to think about it critically. So, we need to reconcile our past, find contentment with our present, and motivation for the future. Cool. Now what? What does that mean, and how do we achieve that? I personally need a strong mix of therapy and medication to even keep some semblance of that balance. And I think honestly, any way you can achieve that balance should be valid. For some people, it could just be a few courses on mindfulness. For others, it could be finding something, a career, a hobby, that will give you motivation for a better tomorrow. For some people, it will be trauma processing, or therapy, or medication, or all three. Therapy is something new, something that we as humans have only just begun to utilize, and something that, for some people, is still highly stigmatized. I know people 50, 60, 70 years old that refuse their own happiness because they refuse therapy. My father, unfortunately, was one of those people. But here's the thing. If you think that professional help could help you, the only person's opinion that matters is yours. Nobody else gets to dictate your happiness or how you achieve it. If finger painting with baby food enhances your life and brings you happiness, then do it. Like, yeah, your uncle might make sideways comments at family reunions, but in my opinion, your true happiness and anything that contributes to it is way more important than having Uncle Bob's approval. However, there is a difference between happiness and hedonism. Hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure, not the pursuit of happiness. Pleasure can be a part of happiness, but only pursuing pleasure without the self-control or restraint that's required to create and maintain happiness, it can become toxic. Pleasure from purely external sources like sex, drugs, alcohol, romance, food, and overindulgence in these pleasures leads to a detachment from reality, not an enhancement of it. And escapism cannot create sustainable happiness. Hedonism is something that we, as a modern capitalist society, struggle with. We have created a culture of self-care that is just a culture of self-indulgence. And the idea that our happiness can come from temporary, external sources like money, praise, luxury items is a misconception that feeds into our struggle with happiness. So, we understand happiness, we understand our hardships with happiness, and what we ultimately need to do as individuals to achieve that sustained feeling of positive emotions. As I tried to collect my many, many thoughts about the pursuit of happiness and what that looked like, I had one more question for Katie. What could we as a society implement to create and boost our collective happiness?
Well, we can start first with kindness. Give it to anyone and everyone you come into contact with, for any reason or for no reason at all. Because being kind to people feels good. And just by giving it out for free, you start a chain reaction. You change every person over the course of the day that you give kindness to, and they pass it on. True kindness gives off a different vibration, and you feel it. And once someone gives you that vibration, it is so freaking contagious. You can't help but pass it on. You ever get into a really good mood? Like one of those moods where it feels like your teeth are made of sunshine and all you want to do is smile at people? Wouldn't you love to give the gift of that feeling to everyone, every day? Because that's what kindness does. When I was on my second or third date with my now fiance, a couple a few tables away paid for our meal and said, "You guys are just so cute and happy together, and we wanted to show you we're proud of that." A complete stranger. Now, believe me when I tell you, years later, I'm still riding that high. And every time I think about it, I get this huge burst of energy inside my chest that makes me feel like every pore in my body is radiating sunshine. And I have 1,000,001 more memories that do that exact same thing. I can't explain why, but this is what works for me. These moments help me keep a positive mind every day. We can also practice keeping our mind positive by learning to appreciate small things and to question your desires, by remembering that happiness is found within us and is made by our choices, including our choice in attitude. Happy thoughts make happy feelings, and happiness is a way of life that is created, not given. Moving forward, we learn to overcome factors that contribute to our unhappiness because we are 100% responsible for our happiness. And above all, please, celebrate every day that you wake up and are gifted this miraculous, beautiful, wonderful gift of life, and use that gift every day to choose to be alive, to choose to feel alive, and share that feeling, because this world deserves it.
Now we have everything. The complete formula of happiness in 30 minutes or less. Now we all have a river of serotonin running through our veins. You're welcome. I'm kidding, of course. But maybe I don't have to be. I hope we've all learned something today about ourselves, about happiness. Before we go today, I'd like to give you one last step to achieving some long-lasting positive feelies. Don't force yourself to be happy. Toxic positivity is not happiness. And to understand and appreciate happiness, we have to understand that happiness isn't going to be the only emotion that we feel. Bad things are going to happen. Other people are going to ruin our days. But we can choose to be different. We can choose happiness. And choosing happiness, that doesn't always mean that you'll be happy. But it does mean that at least you're trying. Thank you so much to Katie for helping me make this episode. I kind of panicked when I realized that I didn't have anything planned for this week, and she really helped me bang this episode out. Also, be on the lookout for our podcast, According to Philosophy. You can find According to Philosophy on any social media platform, except TikTok, because TikTok editing is hard, at According to Meta. And that's just that little @ sign thingy with the words According to Meta, and that's META. If you want to keep up with everything the human condition, make sure to follow us at The Human Pods, anywhere you can type a username, basically. If you have a story you want to tell, you can email us at thehumanpods@gmail.com. And of course, if you want to run your feed and follow me, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Ephemerality. That's EPHEMARALITI. And basically, that's just the word ephemerality with an I at the end instead of a Y. But yeah, that one was pretty good. I would give that like a solid 7 out of 10. Thanks for listening this week, and next week I'm starting a super interesting series that I think you guys will really like. Have a good one. Bye.